Okay, I think I'll get going now as it looks like most people have joined in. Once again, my name's Paul Sims. I'm the chairman at Pharma. I'm actually speaking to you today from Philadelphia, but I have my colleague Josh back in London. And welcome to today's webinar, which is called Time to Embrace Social Media Marketing, How Pharma Marketers Can Take the Plunge and Make Authentic Online Connections a Core Capability. This has actually been a very popular session. We've got well over 1,000 people signed up. Thank you very much for being one of them. And what that means is that we can have a really great discussion today. I'm hoping that it's not going to be a didactic one-way conversation, but indeed that everybody who's listening in says hello and indeed makes sure that they ask at least one question over the course of the next hour. So why did we decide to go for this topic? Well, in a word, it's about patients, and patients are looking for easily accessible and often personal guidance, and they frequently turn, therefore, to social media. They're looking for advice, they're looking for authoritative voices, not just those of their peers. Of course, pharma tends, or historically has tended to veer away from social media for fear of compliance, AE reporting, all of the many issues that I'm sure you're already familiar with. But this dichotomy, we don't believe, can last forever. Patient expectations are continually growing. They are increasingly demanding a 24/7 approach, and it is absolutely vital that the companies engage authentically, attentively, and appropriately where they can. Patients and HCPs, of course, are changing how they are connecting, how they're self-educating, how they're communicating, and of course, not only the expectations, but the opportunities with the new insights and increased engagement now outweighs the negatives, whatever your goal might be. So the session today is really designed to try and think of some practical ways to really make social media work for you, your brand, your company, how to create a positive online environment that protects that brand and offers that engagement opportunity, ways to actually structure and plan and also measure social media so that it amplifies your marketing goals at the same time as providing that authentic conversation that we're looking for, and even that it influences positively patient behavior and boosts adherence. So I'm really pleased to say that I'm not going to be covering this on my own. I'm going to be covering it with some lovely smiling people who you can hopefully see on your screen round about now. Yep, there they are. And I want to just say, introduce Dawn to begin with. Dawn is the Chief Social Strategist and Pharma Practice Lead at LiveWorld. Now, you may or may not know about LiveWorld. They are a social content marketing company. They help companies, retail, CPG, financial, travel, and of course, pharmaceutical companies to improve that customer experience by managing conversations in messaging apps and social media to develop deeper relationships with customers. And they can do this at real time, they can do this at speed, and they can do it at scale. So really revolutionizing the management there of user content. And I suggest if you don't know about LiveWorld already that you do investigate further. Dawn is actually the Chief Social Strategist and Pharma Practice Lead at LiveWorld. She engages with clients directly. She's developing innovative and tailored social media strategies that connect and engage patients, caregivers, HCPs to deliver value. And she, of course, is supported by an extensive team, a specialized team focused on creating these initiatives. She's actually got experience in many aspects of the digital world at Dell, at SolarWinds, and she's done lots of social media strategy in the past. So really great you could be here, Dawn, and thank you to LiveWorld for being such a great partner in making today's webinar happen well. I'd like to introduce Julissa. Julissa is the head of global social media at Celgene. She's an experienced global healthcare and corporate communications professional. She's got 20 years of building that corporate and brand awareness at many of the world's leading pharma companies. She's responsible for really telling the story of the company and brands to a variety of stakeholders in a way that are more impactful and more relevant. And she was previously actually responsible for leading the global comms strategy for the oncology franchise. She's worked at Archimedes, she's worked at Sanofi, she's worked at Novartis, she's worked at Sanofi, and she's also worked outside core pharma companies at GCI and Ketchum. So once again, Julissa, thank you so much for being with us today. Really appreciate it. Manu is a social media strategy leader at Roche. And in his role, he oversees all social media and digital communication strategy for the global product strategy communications team. He actually provides a lot of training for the team, reviews plans, brings in content, drives team improvement, channel optimization, brand consistency, segmentation, analytics, metrics, a huge amount of stuff, and acts as the team's point person for digital in Roche Group Communications, who own and operate the global corporate social media channels. So I hope you'll agree with me that we couldn't be with a better panel than the one we have today. Now, I'd like to just make sure that you guys are going to be active on today's session. So if you could write a quick hello into the questions box on the right-hand side, then I know that you haven't fallen asleep just yet. So, oh, very good, very good. I can see them all running now. I feel popular. Thank you very much to everybody there. So yeah, keep active now that you've got your hands on this, and let's make this a conversation, as I said at the beginning. Today's session is being recorded. You don't need to send me a message asking about that. We'll make sure we get that to you after the session so that you can share with colleagues or review the information. So one thing that happened when we were telling people about this webinar in the first place is we got almost an accusation, if I can call it that. We said we're going to be focusing on social media, and somebody wrote in and said, huh, aren't you guys 10 years too late? And in a way they're right, because obviously this has been at least a decade, if not more, and you know, we're still trying to embrace this. So, you know, why do we feel like now is the time to really focus on that? And rather than answer that question myself, I'd like to ask Manu and Julissa maybe to give us some of their thoughts on that. So, Julissa, would you like to go first and give us your perspective on why this is such a critical topic right now?
Sure, thanks. I think for a couple of reasons. Right, it's not a new topic, obviously, and it's certainly not something that the pharma industry hasn't been trying to embrace over the last decade. But I think, you know, even recently I was attending a Facebook educational session, and they shared that up till now they have about 176 pharma branded and unbranded pages. And that's, you know, they've been staffing up and they've been changing and evolving their model. I think you see that with Snapchat as well, where they recently came out with their pharma offering. And so while, you know, there's been a slow adoption, there's certainly been an increase in that adoption. And I think we are at a point where there's a lot more engagement here in the US, and I would say starting to grow at ex-US. I think that there is more opportunity. I think these platforms are adapting and understanding our specific needs on how to care for branded pages and promotional rules in the US and ex-US. They're obviously also evolving around the metrics issue and things to align with other ways in which we are using digital advertising, for instance. So I think it's an incredible time. I've seen over the last several years that I've been leading social here at Celgene, we really have seen this evolution, not only within our company, but certainly outside with all of the social media platforms out there, really sort of providing a more tailored offering to the pharma industry.
Thank you, Julissa. That was great. And by the way, I'm getting lots of messages of support while you're saying those things. You know, never too late. Lots of people very glad we're addressing it. Manu.
So yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with all of those things. Our problem for those of us outside the US is obviously being able to show the value of social media has always been very challenging, continues to be so. So it's not that we haven't tried for the last decade to make social media meaningful and measurable. It's just how to be able to show that value either back to the business or provide value to the audiences. And I guess I would say, I think we now have an opportunity that we didn't have a decade ago, which I describe as the gradual and inexorable rise of content marketing as a discipline and as an approach. So we're moving away from driving people down the funnel, which we're all pretty good at, like in the US or outside the US, to the concept of building and nurturing audiences to whom we will provide value. And obviously social media channels and social media content is obviously the primary way, I guess, of being able to implement content marketing strategies, particularly, as I said, for us ex-US, where we can't talk product. So I think it's a great opportunity. I think we can make great strides in the next few years.
Excellent. Okay, I'd like to hand over to Dawn now, who's going to also answer that question, but also take us through a few slides to really set up the rest of the conversation. So Dawn, over to you.
Great. So let's talk a little bit deeper, and thank you to both Manu and Jaleesa for your thoughts. I completely agree. Let's talk a little bit more about why now is the right time for social media in US and ex-US, and why we see so much momentum, as Jaleesa mentioned. First, let's start by looking at a little bit of data around how healthcare is used. So it's not surprising in an age where we really value peer reviews as the key input to so many of our decisions, whether it's purchase decisions, whether it's decisions on movies to see, whether it's decisions on childcare locations. We have become a culture of peer recommendation, and the peer recommendation has a weight that is driving everything up to and including social media being a trusted source for healthcare information. We see people go to these social media communities for a variety of different reasons. Some of the key behaviors that we see include folks looking to replace an overburdened social support network for folks with chronic conditions. You can tell your friends and family about a chronic condition only so many times before they're fatigued, and the level of support that you need as a patient becomes a little bit harder to come by. We see that as a key driving behavior inside of these communities. We also see these communities act as a filtering mechanism for new information around the condition. Folks in the communities who are more medically technical will often act as a filter to take new medical information that has come out, new complicated medical studies, things that are written in a medicalese level that folks don't understand, and they'll filter them and read that information back to the general community. And we also see patients talking and collaborating about their journey, sharing things that have been a challenge, sharing healthcare providers that have been particularly helpful as they have continued their journey, and supporting each other through their journey as they go. In addition to consumers, we also see healthcare providers using social both to connect with peers as well as to stay current and have a window into the patient or condition area. Particularly among specialists, we see quite a bit of use of social media in collaboration with each other. We also see a lot of use of social collaboration spaces ex-US, and of course that's a key market for us to reach healthcare providers both in the US and outside, but as our branded options are fairly limited outside the US, that becomes a key practice area for us and a key opportunity to connect. So we've reached a time, we keep talking about this momentum and this time for things to really grow in the space. And we see quite a bit of evidence of this tipping point, this opportunity to gain momentum and move things to the marketer's side. There are dozens, as Jaleesa mentioned, there are dozens of, even hundreds of social programs now, and they range from, and there's three examples here, Amavig, which is a new product launch, which is in a migraine product. It's intended to share information about a new treatment paradigm, a new MOA, and to allow folks to have a space to gather and share their frustration with such a challenging condition. Conversely, you see products like Synthroid that has been around for more than 60 years out there engaging with their audience in a highly competitive market space. We see these folks coming together to share their condition information about hypothyroidism and to talk about the value of Synthroid as a part of their journey. The third example that I've put up is Humira Complete Answers, which is a full service customer service program for patients who are on any of Humira's indications to come and receive support around the product itself. So we see a lot of different types of programs that deliver a lot of different business objectives. We also see a lot more than Facebook now, which is really exciting to see. We see Snap, formerly known as Snapchat. We see Instagram. We see Tumblr. We see Reddit. We see YouTube. Even seen some disease education programs on Whisper. It's become a much broader opportunity to engage with patients and healthcare providers in Sermo and Doximity and LinkedIn in ways that we haven't previously had the opportunity to. So not only do we see momentum in terms of the number and the variety of program, but in the number of platforms that we can reach our various audiences on. We also are seeing great use of social to continue to support our patients through their consideration journey here in the U.S. And in New Zealand, where we can use unbranded efforts to share condition information and then continue that evolution all the way through branded programs that share the benefit of particular products and help people with the right information at every stage of their consideration journey. And even tie things like television commercials back to digital efforts and retargeting to try to make the best, most effective consideration funnel and path for our patients. So as we see the rise of these different opportunities and different platforms, there's an opportunity for us, whether you're a large company or a small company, to work with your MRL friends and partners to create programs and advance programs, whether that's the littlest of healthcare companies using the examples of all of these larger companies who have created a path forward for all of us by being pioneers and creating compliant processes for how to have these engagements, whether they're condition related in the US or ex-US, whether they're product related. We now have examples and a path forward we can share. Or if you're the largest of companies and you create a digital acceleration program where you create guidelines that are company-wide that enable every marketer to leverage the power of social media without it being a decision made by any one MRL team member, whether that capability is available, or whether you're using Center of Excellence models that both Manu and Jalissa use within their companies to share the expertise. There's momentum moving for all types of companies at all levels to make the best opportunity of these social channels at this point in time. So this is just a couple of slides to start our thinking, to drive. It looks like there are quite a few questions coming in, and we'll pop back to the panel to continue this discussion.
Thank you so much, Dawn, and you are exactly right. There are indeed several questions, good questions coming in. Keep them coming in. I will come to them in just a moment. Let me just check and see, though, with our panel, have you got any immediate reflection you want to give based on what Dawn's just said?
Yeah, basically, again, just for the ex-US, it's like, what's the challenge is, what are you going to do if, you can't talk products? So a lot of those examples are amazing, and it would just be great if we could actually do those, say, in Europe or elsewhere. So the challenge is, what is of value? And can you put the thinking together, like what would be of value to an HCP on social media when you can't actually talk about clinical practice changes necessarily, or medicines in general, or even your own products. And that's the major challenge that we all need to struggle with here.
I would add as well that, for my experience, one of the other areas that I see growing, and it certainly has been evolving digitally, but clinical trial recruitment as well, being a really interesting area to use social within. And I think companies are experimenting in a variety of ways to raise awareness, to drive people into considering the trial, both even physicians as well, making them aware of some of the options that are out there. So again, I think it's really really interesting to see all the ways in which we can use these platforms across the organization, not just from a corporate or brand perspective.
Indeed. Okay. Thank you. What I'm going to do is I'd love to get the audience involved. Obviously, I've got some great questions coming in, so keep them coming. I realize that we have a very global audience. As I said, we've got more than 1,000 people, but really from all parts of the world listening in today. So I realize that the answer to questions is going to depend very much on which geographic regions you're responsible for. That with said, I think it's still good to get an idea of where our audience is. So if you look at at your screens right now, you should see a question pop up. What is the primary purpose of your company or team's investment in social media? So this is obviously trying to determine what you're really trying to get out of this from your point of view. So we've got 5 options. Information, get core messages out to our audience. We want to ensure that they are informed. We want to engage, that's a two-way or multi-way dialogue with our audience. We want to understand. We really want to just listen, just observe, just hear what real conversation looks like. We want to present ourselves, image in a certain way, appear that we indeed are a listener and representing our company as we would wish. Or finally, you're not sure, we're not investing at the moment, or you're investing only in a very ad hoc fashion. Okay, I can see 50% of you have voted so far, so let's get the other 50% on board. I will give you 3 more seconds. 3, 2, 1. Thank you very much. Okay, we got nearly everybody. That's good. Let's have a look at the results. Engagement is the winner, over 2/5 of you, but significant minority there, over 1/4 for the information. So it's very much about informing, but also understanding image, and still 10% of people not sure or not investing at the moment. So that's an interesting one. I think actually, I'm going to actually go straight to asking another question as well. So if you look at your screens, you'll see a new question coming up, and this will further help us to understand where everybody is. Who do you believe should be the primary audience to influence with your company or team's social investment? Is it mainly physicians, HCPs, a professional community? Is it mainly patients and patient groups? Or can you really not decide between those two and think it should be equally physicians and patients? Or would you zoom out and actually say it's the general public, whether they're a patient, a physician, or anybody, and they should just be better informed, better aware, better engaged with whatever it is that you're discussing? Or finally, you're just not sure, or you have such low levels of investment that you can't really say. I'll hold that open another 3 seconds. I can see we're all doing well there on the voting. Excellent. Okay, let's have a look at the results. Equally physicians and patients, again getting just over 2/5 of the vote there, but also a reasonably even spread, I would say, overall. So different audiences. Again, I'm fully aware this really affects where you are, and the DTC legislation, etc., depending on which country you're in. But I think that gives us a nice sort of frame of reference really for where we all are. So some interesting results there. I want to just ask our panel, firstly, any comment, any surprise on what they saw from those results? I can show the results back on screen again if you want. But also I'd like to just focus a little bit on, sorry, excuse me 1 second, just got too much on my screen right now, on what we can do as companies to overcome any risk concerns that we have and actually do more investment in this area? How do we get that internal alignment? How do we get that senior level buy-in and sponsorship to actually improve those numbers? So yeah, any comments on the polls, any comments on how we can actually bring this to life more readily within our organizations? Who wants to comment on that?
Let's I'm happy to jump in. So, interestingly, with the poll, I think I found similarly here in my experience that we certainly started out with more of a focus on patients, and then as we began to do more research and dig into what the opportunities were with the different social channels, we began to change our split and include more physicians. And I think that's evolved not just in the U.S., but certainly ex-U.S. I think to answer your other question around sort of how do you get aligned with the organization and get folks on board to support what you're trying to do? And I think it's really no different than any other way that you're approaching strategically how you're trying to support your business or your brand or your company. And that really is to do your research, create that foundation of understanding of what are the opportunities, how do they align to your objectives, and then really begin to put the work together around behind the scenes to educate and train, share your rationale, figure out your processes, your governance, your do's and don'ts. I mean, really, I think in my experience, what has worked really well is working through all of those areas that you know are going to be things that are going to be of concern. Again, how to mitigate risk, how to triage adverse events, how to handle questions that might come in if you open up comments. What kinds of content do you want to put on your channels? What are some of the do's and don'ts around those content pieces? How will you do advertising? What does it look like? Not just the ad itself, but really sort of structurally. Is it campaign focus? Is it come and go? Is there specific objectives with that? How will you measure? How does this align into your overall digital marketing mix? I mean, I think there's a lot of questions to ask and answer before you even launch your presence on these social channels. But I find that when you do that work beforehand, that you'll end up being more successful on this channels once you're up and running and really begin to engage and have a presence on these platforms and really begin to share some of that success, hopefully, that you've had back with those folks that were part of the process to get you there.
And this is Dawn.
Yeah,
I will agree. I'm sorry. Please go ahead.
Sorry, thanks, Dawn. So yeah, completely agree with Julissa. Obviously, the first barriers are always technical, like, oh my God, how do I actually post? What is a good tweet? What is the process? How do I get my legal person to agree to things? So those are always the first ones. I think the main challenge for most people in my company at least, and I suspect in others, is really being able to show or to align to meaningful objectives. I think Julissa already touched on that. But it's not just about having the best reach, having big impressions, clicks, likes, etc. I think we all know this, but it's so easy when you're under time pressure, resource pressure, to go for those easy KPIs. So what are those objectives that could actually show meaningful value to the business? Like, can we add meaningfully to lead gen, demand gen, lead gen activities going elsewhere? Can we generate insights that the sales organization could use when they're out going to see customers? If we can nail that, then I think all of this becomes a lot easier. But it's obviously requires some time, requires some effort, but it's definitely where social media will really start showing the value in the future.
And Dawn, just before you comment, just to say I'm getting a few comments from the audience saying, can you provide any tangibility? Are there any examples, any real life situations? So when you answer, maybe you can color it in a little bit if you can.
Sure. So a couple of thoughts and comments to build on what's already been said. What I see is that the most successful companies in really breaking through the barriers to create not just one-off successful programs, but systemic use of or systemic ability to use based on business drivers, social media start with, as Jaleesa mentioned, a digital acceleration model. For example, inside of some of our client companies, we'll gather in leaders from the MRL teams, the PV teams, various legal disciplines, brand teams, and create a set of guidelines by channel that say, if you're going to use this channel for these purposes, here's how you interact. And those guidelines are then shared back not only to new brand team members, so you continue that education and approach knowledge, but also to all of the extended team participants, the MRL and the PV teams that are involved with those programs, to make sure that everybody's on the same page before you even start talking about how and when you're going to use it for your particular brand. And that systemic approach for both creating guidelines and limitations means that it's not one individual regulator who can say no because they're uncomfortable. The whole company has said, yes, this is a channel that we're going to embrace. Here are the guidelines, and now it makes it much easier for the whole team to be consistent on how it's implemented and laid out. And that also applies to Manu's point about measurement. Creating measurement structures, while they need to be flexible to apply to the different business objectives by product area and by the goal of the program, creating some infrastructure that lets you measure the programs and makes it easier so that each marketer isn't trying to create a measurement standard every time you create a new program, but that you have measurement programs in place across the company that help to your really wise point about being time constrained and resource constrained, that make people more successful by having resources available to supplement those things that are often lost in the chaos.
Thank you. Really interesting comments. I'd love to hear from the panelists. Again, some calls for some sort of concrete examples here. Where have you actually seen this done well? Where has there been the best use of social media? Where has it played a strategic role, had a major impact on the ROI of a campaign? And indeed, where have you seen investment working so much that you can say that you're going to see a lot more of that in the future of this area? So anything from our panel on that, please.
I think that's a hard question because so many of us are going to be limited by either client confidentiality or company confidentiality. But a couple of the tactics that I've seen be very successful in a recent product launch, we were able to create an unbranded community 18 months before an actual product launch, and we were able to take on several social properties this unbranded effort to create a very specific, highly targeted audience to leverage at product launch to deliver the new product messaging in a space that hadn't seen a condition space that hadn't seen a new treatment in many years, and reinvigorate the patient audience to this new product that was coming out very easily, and to maximize the investment by making sure we were talking to the right folks. So that's a tactic. I can't necessarily mention the brand that we had great success with recently. I hope that's a useful example.
I think the other thing
from Dawn, sorry. The other thing to build on that is, like, again, trying to find a KPI or a metric that actually makes more sense than your average engagement. So the example that I can easily mention is if, for example, you're trying to drive a conversation between a patient and a doctor, the average campaign would have, driving to a website, so the KPI would be clicks, likes, shares of the post pointing to the website, but then thinking around things like, we want to drive the patient to go and see a doctor. Well, they could download a one-page document, questions to ask a doctor about condition X. And you can make a fair assumption that someone who downloads that document is doing so with the express purpose of then going to see their doctor to ask questions about condition X. So that is a far better KPI than, is the typical in the norm in the industry. So it's I think it's simple steps like that where you're really trying to find those actions that you can measure easily on social, online, that can show value to the business.
Yeah, and I think, to add on what's been said, I mean, I'm not going to give specific examples about our brands and so forth, but I do think what I've seen in the last few years is this growth in our presence on these channels and our overall spend and our willingness to try different tactical approaches on these platforms. I think, for me, some of the things that I've led at the company was a very successful, for instance, Twitter chat that we started a couple of years ago called Pink Chat for pancreatic cancer. It's something that the community has now taken over and is running with on a monthly basis. But it was really an opportunity to bridge a dialogue that wasn't happening regularly or consistently at all amongst physicians, patients, caregivers, and others that were interested in this space. And while it was a simple, not paid tactic, it really began to help position us in this space in a way that we wanted to be seen amongst these various audiences. But really, I think for the benefit of those that were struggling and also trying to navigate this difficult disease, this difficult cancer and hard to treat cancer, it became a place for people to go and talk about and understand and uncover information that might be useful to them into their treatment journey and their overall disease journey. But I think we've looked at a variety of things, from polling to Facebook Live to Twitter chats to just general advertising to figure out what works. And it's going to evolve and change depending on the brand's objectives and what they're trying to achieve. I think the whole debate around opening comments on Facebook for your branded channel is always an interesting one to have, and it really should align to what you want to achieve and what metrics you're going to be measuring your activities against. But I also come back to, if you're going to play in the space, I think it's really important for folks to not overextend themselves and really sort of take a stepwise approach to making sure that they've done that pre-work, they've set themselves up, hopefully for success in advance before they get on these channels, but also recognize what's the value of being on these channels in the first place. So if you're going to be on Facebook and opening up comments, I think Dawn has sort of alluded to some of the examples earlier that, there are patients out there who are looking for that customer service, if you will, engagement and really wanting to get more information about a brand, or maybe they're having difficulty with access or they're having difficulty with their physician and they want answers. And so, yes, they could probably go to forums and so forth, but they see your brand there and they want to engage and they want to understand your perspective on things. And that can be both a blessing and a challenge, of course, to some degree. So you have to work through what you're able to address on that channel. But that's, to me, part of the purpose. If you're going to be there on Facebook and you're going to open up comments, then truly, make sure you're putting in that resource and that effort to have an engagement strategy and that you're serving the larger purpose. Otherwise, it just becomes another advertising channel, which is fine, but it's not, to me, the true purpose of what some of these channels are meant to be and how they're set up.
And I'll just add one more quick comment. This is Dawn. We've also seen a huge amount of value in having those conversations, those comments turned on, because there are often things that your community can say that you can't say, whether your label is very narrow. We have one client who can't talk to the symptoms of the condition because the label is limited to a change on a diagnostic test. We can't talk to symptom relief, but when we see the community jump in and talk to each other about the results that they've seen from using the product, they can say what they've seen for symptom relief, where we can't say that. So there's a huge amount of value. We see that over and over again in the pages where comments are enabled, that they can make those points that we are limited to be able to say.
Okay, thank you. Some really interesting stuff. Go on, Manu. One more comment. Go for it.
Yeah. Just to add on to that one, a lot of people are always worried about adverse events reports, and I guess for people who haven't got into social with the fear that adverse events are going to be a real problem, it really isn't. In all of the kind of social media campaigns we've done, organic or paid, over the last few years, I think we had a single digit numbers of adverse events reports. per month, if that. So yeah, it really isn't a barrier to going out there and being active online ex-US or anywhere, I guess.
Thank you, Manu. Yeah, so don't let it worry you. That's obviously been a long time debate. We talked just there a little bit about measurement. We started talking about, and we talked a little bit about which platforms and where we actually invest, which platforms and which ones we should actually focus on. So I'm going to ask our audience quickly a couple of more of these poll questions, which give us some interesting results. So look at your screens right now. Do you believe you're able to quantify and justify your social media investments to your management? Or, you know, if you don't have management, then are you still able to quantify and justify them? So this is really a question about whether or not you are good at measurement. So the top option, we have defined and we perform well against our metrics. So yes, we do know what we're doing. We believe we're doing well, but it's not measured properly. So more of a qualitative statement. We don't know how to measure social, or it's not a priority to have that measurement in. We don't ultimately know how well we're doing. Finally, we're not investing enough currently to justify those measurement efforts. So do let me know which one of those is the one for you. I'll hold it open another 3 seconds. I've got just over half of you voted so far. Come on, everyone. 3, 2, 1. Okay, let's have a look at the results. Okay, so this is exactly as I expected it would be. We believe we're doing well, but not measured properly, getting nearly that 2/5 and roughly equal on the others. So that's where we are right now. Clearly, we can improve here. Clearly, we can do exactly what Manu was just talking about and set our KPIs in smarter ways and making sure that we're actually using them. So that's that one. Let's have a look at another a question, if that's okay with everybody. As I said, this is another one about which platforms we're using. So what's your attitude towards investing for your company or brand in multiple social media platforms? So the top one, we work across multiple or most platforms, true omnichannel. You are very heavy social media presence. Second one, we'd like to be on most platforms, but insufficient resources, and that's the reason why you're not on most of those platforms, but you'd like to be. Third one, we focus our resources on disease-specific platforms. So where you have limitations, that is your desire and that is your focus. Or we focus our resources on mainstream platforms, obviously the ones we've been talking about, Facebook, Twitter, and that's where you're focused. Finally, yet again, we have no strong presence on any platform. So once again, the alert half of you have voted. So come on, the others of you. Let's hold it open. 3, 2, 1. Let's go with that. Thank you, everyone. Okay, so 12%, actually more than I expected on we work across multiple and most, so investing strongly there. We'd like to be is the second most popular topic. We focus our resources on disease-specific, only 8%, whereas mainstream up at that 2/5 level again, and then just under 20% saying no strong presence on any platform. So that's where we are at the moment, and hopefully that gives a bit of color. Obviously our panel can comment on those things in just a moment, but I'm aware that we've gone through 45 minutes of our webinar. Time flies when you're talking about something interesting, and I haven't really addressed many of the audience questions which have been coming in very nicely. So what I'd like to do is actually just read a few of these out, and our panel will hopefully be able to select a couple that they can tackle directly. So the KPIs often distort the image of the impacts. Does it make sense to include every comment in our monitoring? That's one question. Are there cases where you would avoid social media, specific conditions, countries, drug types, patient types? Where is social media investment not a good idea? We obviously talked about, Manu, just now about talking about the hesitancy given the AE reporting requirement, but what are the best practices to overcoming the belief within our organizations that that is indeed an issue? You know, how do we manage that internal conversation or that sort of fear, shall we say? I saw a good conversation, a good thing here from Gunther. Good to hear from you, Gunther. Do you apply AI to understand patients and physician sentiment around a product or therapy burden? how common are our uses of this advanced technology, and how useful really are they? I've actually got probably 3 or 4 questions around that. So I'll pause there. I've got lots more questions to come to, but I'm gonna overwhelm you if I do any more. So any comments on what you've heard or seen from the poll results or those questions, panel? I've killed them.
There was a general. No. I mean, guys, these are all such amazing questions. So it's like, where do you start? I think I've reached the point where there was a question around where is social media not worth it, and I think we need to be honest with ourselves. Most of the time, it's like, well, it's not really worth it if we really can't think of a KPI or an action that actually fits within the brand or commercial plan for either the company or the product, right? I think Julissa can comment for Celgene, but I see there's a lot of internal pressure. You have to be on social, and often social media campaigns, the best you can do is, well, we're going to drive a lot of traffic to our microsite, and then, hopefully we'll get a decent bounce rate and time on page, and that's pretty much it. And I think we've collectively allowed this to happen because we haven't really, we haven't thought that there's something better. So really, to the question, should we, where is it not relevant, not worth it doing social media? It's like, well, if you get a proposal either internally or from an agency where the KPI is basically clicks, likes, views, bounce rate, or time on page, that's when not to invest, to be honest. It's like where, you need something that can demonstrate a meaningful behavior or belief change. So is that a download? Is it a sign up? Is it a subscription? Is it driving a potential customer to contact your sales or a medical science liaison organization? If you cannot link your social media strategy to your business strategy, which I do see a lot, then I'd say it's not worth it. Would you agree, Julissa? Or?
Yeah, completely. I would completely agree. I think that there is a lot of interest to try it and test and learn, but I completely agree that if you can't align it to your business objectives, your brand objectives, then I'm not sure I would go forward. I think I've seen over the years the mistake that's made that we want to test and learn, but we're not ready to make a sustained effort. And I think then it sort of fails, if you will. And then people sort of walk away and say, well, it didn't work, so I'm not going to keep doing it. Or, I didn't spend what I wanted. I didn't get the result I was looking for. So, I'm not going to keep trying. It's not worth it. And I think those are common. And I think the ways you get over some of that is to, again, do the pre-work, do some of that planning, figure out how it can support your business, what these channels are good at doing and understanding that. And if you don't know, tap outside agency partners or perhaps others in your company that might have some experience personally or professionally, and begin to pilot if you need to, and then take a step into creating a sustained effort, because that's, I think, where you're going to see some of that value come back. The other point I would make is that it's really probably, I think sometimes people want to rely only on social media to deliver against their objectives to some degree, or how would I say it? I think what I've seen is sort of this misnomer that, again, social can solve for traffic drivers or some other things, and it can to a certain degree, but I really try to focus on how this can fit into the overall digital marketing mix that a brand has, and really either support that surround sound or be supportive of some of the other brand objectives that are going on, or create engagement or whatever your goals are. But ultimately, I don't like to see it only in isolation. And I think if that's where someone's coming to me for, hey, I just want to do this and only this, I would argue that would be a missed opportunity across the board. And I think, it works together in harmony sometimes with some of the other digital efforts that you can do. And I understand budgets can be tight, but I think it's important to really look at the bigger picture and not just social in isolation.
And I see that as the biggest failure point as well, is that programs are created it kind of backward of how we create all our other marketing programs. In our other programs, we begin with a business objective, identify tactics and the measures we're going to use, and then we talk about implementation, what it's going to look like. And unfortunately, because social is relatively new to our industry, we tend to go with more of a shiny object. Oh, that's interesting what somebody else is doing, I'm going to do that too. Then we try to apply measurement after the fact. And to Manu's original point, it doesn't tie back to the business objective. It's measurement using what's available versus measurement that ties back to the objectives. And that's one of the places where I see programs not be successful and not continue and renew. On the other hand, programs that are created directly based on business objectives and with clear measurement plans from the beginning are much more successful, because not only are you creating a program that drives the behaviors you're trying to get to, but it also has thought through metrics and measurements and has optimizations along the way.
Okay.
Going back to one of the other.
Oh.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. I was going to answer one of the other questions.
Yeah, there was a question about AI. There was a question about internal gathering internal support for social media, particularly in the face of fear about AE reporting.
Yeah, I was going to address the AE reporting one. I think that I'm sure Manu has experience with this, and even Dawn. Certainly, big scary world. It's going to be an influx of AEs, but I would concur that that's not really been the case. And I think the way that you get comfort around this is to have a process to mitigate that risk. Train as much as possible on that process and how it's going to really work. Obviously understand your AE reporting requirements, product complaint requirements, have good support agencies to help you with that as well, because you literally, I can't look and see everything at all times. I do need to sleep. So having support agency to help us monitor when we're not able to has really been critical. I think understanding what you're going to address and how quickly. I think one of the biggest debates we've often had here is really understanding what's your timeline, not just the AE reporting timeline, right? There's that 24-hour window typically, but really, if we're going to engage and let the user know that we've seen the AE or that we want to direct them somewhere or give them information about that potential adverse event, what's our commenting timeline threshold and who needs to be involved in some of those decisions. So there are things that you can do to, again, prepare for, but there may be things that come up that you just weren't aware. It's perhaps some new AE or something else that's popped up that you weren't prepared for. Who are your core people to go to help you triage some of that? So I think those are some of the things that have worked well for us. And I would say one last part of it is go back and share back to those who were worried and skeptical and share the proof of what you've experienced, because I think that's how you begin to change minds around this idea that there's so many AEs out there, and they're really not coming in to the degree that people are fearful of.
Okay.
And I can add to that. This is part of LiveWorld's core business, is delivering moderation and response services for our pharma clients. And we actually have a set of benchmarks as a percent of reach and as a percent of comments, how many adverse events you could expect based on whether it's a branded or unbranded or corporate program. So if anybody's interested in those numbers, just shoot an email over to hello@liveworld.com and we'll send you those benchmarks. But they're nowhere near what people expect or the fear patterns that go into it. And, as we look at various platforms, you have a little bit different benchmark numbers, but to Jaleesa's point, having the right mix of pre-approved responses so you can respond real time and appropriate escalation paths for creating real-time responses and or managing anything that might come up as a high risk or a crisis situation. Overall, we see that programs with robust response libraries, and we manage 188 pharma programs at the moment, different pharma pages. And across those, we can get to about 96% of questions we can answer without having to bother the brand manager and ask a question. Then that 4% is either custom responses or is some sort of escalation or concern. So there's two big concerns that we often see around adverse event and response, and one is that there's this massive volume that just doesn't exist, and the other is that it's going to take a huge amount of the marketer's time to answer these questions day in and day out, and neither of those really play out to be true across our portfolio of clients that we support.
Okay, guys, I'm acutely aware of time. We're really running out. We've only got 3 minutes left. There are a couple of, I'm not going to be able to get to every question, but there are a couple of themes on the on other questions. The first one is about this issue of live responses, which obviously we know is something that LiveWorld you specialize in. How do you actually, not just when it comes to the AE reporting side, but how do you actually provide that instantaneous response, remain compliant, and how is that actually managed? And also lots of questions about this AI point, which Gunther actually pulled up. A lot of people have sort of added to that, and I don't think we've really answered that. And how do we use analytics tools, listening tools, a lot of people talking about that, to really push that forward. So maybe we're not going to have time for everybody to answer that, but maybe just 1 or 2 comments on that, please, from the panel. And by the way, while you do that, I'm going to ask one more poll question, but in the background. So please do take a look at your screens and answer this while our panel address the AI and the other point that I mentioned, around the listening.
Response.
So yeah, sorry, the response. Yeah, the fast responses.
This is Jalissa. I mean, I think from the live response, and I know you can answer this too, John. I just want to just give 2 cents on this, and then feel free to obviously build on it. But the live response issue, to me, has always been based on having a really good pre-approved response bank with variety, and I think that's what's really worked well for us. I mean, we know our brands, we know our company, we can pretty much anticipate a large mass of what the questions will be. We've done live engagements like Facebook Live questions and so forth, and Twitter chats with sitting next to our legal and regulatory colleagues in the room, and that certainly helps. But if that's not the case, really sort of baking through and thinking through that brainstorm of all of those potential areas that might come up and having flexibility in your answers with some nuance. And I think the other layer is trust. There's some trust in the people who are managing this process.
And we also add in a variety of openings and closings along with the approved middles, and several varieties for the approved middles, so that you can make it feel very organic and natural with it all being scripted and pre-approved. So it does both what the community needs and what the MRL and PV team needs. On the AI question, we certainly see an opportunity for AI around bots and delivering particularly condition-based information. One of our clients is working in women's health care and is using bots to engage with younger women about sexual health questions that are taboo and uncomfortable to ask. We see, quite a bit of opportunity there to use technology to help supplement what folks aren't comfortable or willing to talk about publicly. There's a lot of potential uses there, but that's just one that came to top of mind.
Okay, thank you. I realize that was some rapid fire questions. Thank you to all of you who voted in the poll in the background. Let me just quickly share the results of that. You can look at your screen now. We are doing okay, is what I would say. It's almost a perfect normal distribution there, those results. So that's where we are now. I think that's probably what we expected as well. Variable there being the strongest, pockets of great work depending on brand and employee, clearly showing that it's still up to the individuals or the individual teams as opposed to company-wide mandate or company-wide efforts. We do probably need more senior level sponsorship from our organizations going forward. Well, I'm afraid that we are out of time. A bit of a breathless conversation and many questions. I'm so sorry I wasn't able to get to in the end, but really appreciate the conversation nonetheless. Perhaps offline we might be able to address some of these questions and report back with a piece of written content post event. Obviously, I want to say a major thank you to our panelists, to Dawn, Jalissa, Manu, Particular thanks to Dawn at LiveWorld for indeed making sure this event actually happened and drove indeed a lot of the work behind this and making sure we had such a healthy audience. So great thanks to Dawn and to the LiveWorld team for that. If you enjoyed this conversation, then please do talk to us some more. And the best place to talk to us is actually at one of our upcoming events. For some reason, we're cycling through some slides here, but I believe that my colleague Josh is going to show a quick slide regarding this in just a second. Come to our Barcelona or our Philadelphia events. Barcelona is March 31st to April 2nd next year. We've got some great people involved, as you can hopefully see on your screen now. We are going to be talking about social media there as well. Obviously, Barcelona has a European focus, and if you can't make it to that, then come to Philadelphia, which is 2 weeks later. That's April 15 and 16 next year. And of course, again, some great names and a US-specific conversation, or a North American-specific conversation, should I say, taking place there. And we'd love to obviously see you all in person at one of those upcoming events. Thank you again to our panelists. Thank you again to LiveWorld. It's been a really interesting session. I'm going to hold open the webinar now for a couple of minutes, because in all good social or digital conversations, it's always good to get that feedback and listen in. So please do just write into the questions box with any suggestions you've got, any last questions you'd love to have answered, any ideas for the future, any expressions of gratitude or undying love, whatever it is, we'll take it all. Do write in, and we appreciate that. So I'll hold the webinar open for a couple of minutes to let you do that. Thank you so much for everybody for being here. I really hope that you take some practical advice from what you've heard and get going with this in your companies. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a great day.